I felt like I had almost two roles. One as a member of Congress who needed to try to provide for and care for the constituents of our district, but the other role was just as a neighbor and a friend. As it turned out, there were 81 people from our district who were killed that day. And my wife Maureen and I at first said, well, who from our hometown was lost? There were 3 people from our hometown who were lost that day. And I said, Maureen, what can we do? And she said, what do you do when someone loses someone in their family? You go visit them, you make them a dinner. You're a good friend and a neighbor to them. So that's what we did for the 3 families who lived in our town. And then as I asked our staff to begin to compile a list of anyone as we're learning who hadn't come home, who may have been still missing, who was confirmed dead from the towns in our congressional district. I asked our staff to begin to compile that list, and every day, for a few weeks after that, it seemed that list got a little longer. Fortunately, the list of who was missing would get smaller and smaller each day, and sometimes that was someone who was then located who had survived, but more often than not, it was someone who we found had passed away. So we began visiting all of those families, and after, it probably took us a few weeks. My wife originally just made a big pot of chili and some corn muffins and chocolate chip cookies that she's famous for. And we brought these dinners to these families just in our hometown. And then when we realized that this was going to be dozens and dozens of families in our district, my wife said, we've got to reach out to everybody. So she enlisted a whole group of her friends from church and friends from town they were enlisted to help make dinners. So we would then go with our staff to visit these families, first to bring them a dinner, to let them know that we were available to them if they needed anything. I brought my congressional staff with us to make sure that if they had issues they were trying to work through, from Social Security issues to, so many of these families had mortgages and financial situations they were trying to work out, tax implications of the financial implications of what they were going through. There were so many more practical things that needed to be addressed, but it was difficult to address them in the emotion of that time, the aftermath of those weeks afterwards, but they needed to be addressed. So our staff was helping those families work through those issues. It was mostly widows, mostly young widows, 30-something, 40-something-year-old women who had just lost their husbands, had children running around the house as we were visiting with them, and in just utter shock